If AI is the PhD in your pocket, what does that make you? The intern or the manager? Duane Forrester is the founder and CEO of UnboundAnswers.com, where he helps businesses navigate the shifting intersection of AI, search, and digital trust. He's launched Bing Webmaster Tools, stood up schema.org, and today he's trying to solve a much messier problem: how to keep your business discoverable when large language models rewrite the rules of visibility. This episode is about the new SEO, if we're still even calling it that. Duane argues that AI hasn't killed search, but it has fractured it. From chunking strategies and semantic density to the myth of the universal answer, we dig into how optimization is evolving and why the real leverage might now sit with content creators who understand systems as well as storytelling. We also unpack why people management is emerging as the next essential SEO skill, not just managing a team, but managing AI as part of that team. Duane's optimistic that search will be around for another 30 years, but whether you thrive in that future might come down to something much harder to automate: judgment. Duane has been at the forefront of every major shift in this industry, from the early days of MSN search to the AI-driven future we're now barreling toward. He's a voice worth paying attention to as we enter yet another inflection point. This one's worth a listen from start to finish. Here we go. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Page 2 podcast. I'm your host, John Clark, and as always, joined by my partner in crime at Moving Traffic Media, Joe DeVita. Today, we're very excited to welcome Duane Forrester to the show. Welcome, Duane.
Hey, guys. Thank you for having me on.
We're excited to have you. Both Joe and I are, we're going back and forth yesterday, just trying to trim down the very long list of questions that we have. I'm sure we won't get to a third of it. But
I went through them and thought, if we can do all these, this is going to be amazing.
I know, right?
This is going to be great stuff to cover.
But we had Marshall Simmons on, and it was a little bit of a history lesson. And, he's been in the industry so long. You've been in the industry, I think, 25 years or so. And you were at Microsoft from 2007 to 2011. I was there from 2008 to 2010. And it was one of the many periods in Microsoft's history where they were having some evolution. At that point in time, they were launching Bing, and Google was by far the dominant player in the search space. And your role there, the way that I always envisioned it, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but it was sort of like Matt Cutts on Google, Duane Forrester on Bing, and you guys were sort of the spokesheads there. When Microsoft was so heavily focused on software and Office, how was working in that environment where you were definitely the underdog, but also trying to get a huge organization that's not really focused on search to move a little bit more that way? Did you have any tough conversations?
Yeah, this is interesting. Okay, first off, I'm going to correct some of our dates here. Okay, I joined Microsoft in, I think it was 2018. I was there almost 10 years. It was like 9 years and 7 months or something. But a lot of what you're alluding to predated me joining the company. It was very good timing, as it turns out, but MSN search was really the kind of beginning of it. Okay. And look, it's really helpful too, I think, for folks to understand, because everybody kind of looks at Microsoft and they look at Meta and they look at Google and Amazon and look all of the big tech companies, and they think it's a company that is a shell, and inside that shell is everyone. And it's really probably more accurate to describe it as Microsoft is an incubator filled with a series of startups, because every group within the company is treated like a standalone entity, and it has to sing for its dinner just like every other group does. So there's no vast money pit and, oh, you want to go do that, we'll fund that until it becomes a success. No. What ends up happening is you get things like, I'll take you way back to the early days of AOL, for example. And you had this ecosystem that sprang up, and AOL's was built around keywords and, relative. And at the time that was fine. You were talking like tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of entities. And so a business could own a keyword. There wasn't that much traffic. There weren't that many people, and it was all fine, right? Like today, could you imagine? We see some of the CPC costs in Google
Right.
advertising for, like legal terms, right? And it's like, $8,000 a click, right? It's like, this is crazy. But back then, you had a small group of people who stepped forward and said, hey, this idea of an aggregator where we bring all the news together and we publish some of our own stuff uniquely, and it's very pop centric. This is what gave birth to MSN. And during the time MSN was growing, Google was coming out of stealth and incubator and becoming something. People inside the company took note of this because they knew about this anyhow, because they were a part of the initial, do we fund conversations and the pitches and all that stuff. And they made the decision that, yeah, you know what? Search could be a thing. We should probably have our own people. And that was the beginning of MSN Search. I was actually hired because I wrote I wrote a book, and a recruiter saw it and went, hey, we want you to come work for us. And so he calls me up and he leaves a voicemail for me, and, he emails me and he says, I'm a recruiter with Microsoft. Give me send me your phone number or whatever. Right. I'm like, yeah, this is BS. If you're real, give me your number. I'll call you. 30 seconds later, I get a phone number. And I look up the area code and I'm like, tells me nothing, right? It's like out of Idaho or something, right? Quick look on the map and I'm like, Idaho, Washington. Okay. Who knows, right? Little do now I know better, right? And I call the guy up and he goes, I will never forget his name. His name was Jubal and his last name was Ince, Ince. And I asked him about it because we worked together, me going through the process for like a good 2 months. And I asked him about his name and he said, my parents were straight up out of the 60s and they loved jubilance as a name. So my first name is Jubal and it plays off my last name, and I was like, wow, okay, that's super creative, super cool. And so anyhow, he was my on-ramp into Microsoft. And at that time, it was still very much MSN Search, but in the background, unbeknownst to me, they wanted to do more with it because they were looking at the revenue that Google was, getting from the actual ads. And they were saying, hey, we want us a piece of that, right? Because they were, at the time, I don't even remember what the percentage was, but they were like a legitimate percentage of like search traffic was going through MSN Search, probably because there really weren't a lot of other options. Yeah. So like by default, somebody has to be second, third, fourth, and so on. And I got in there and I started speaking. I'd already been speaking at conferences, but when I started showing up and I was the SEO guy for MSN, inevitable, right? Like, are you not going to ask that person about search? He's an SEO guy. He talks search. He, as far as shares an office wall with the engineers in the search program, like
knows all the secret sauce.
Right? Yeah. And now we're back to discrete startups. Okay. And we're into literal zip code deviations of where my offices were and their offices were. And the likelihood of me ever being in a meeting with them was very small, except it wasn't zero. Because we did have very, very small access to key people. And we were able to actually ask questions. Imagine a group of SEOs and a lead search engineer sitting down, having the conversation about what it takes to rank better. And that was amazing to me. You were never so crazy as you would say, here's my webpage, tell me what I need to fix, right? Like that's just, nobody does that. However, if you understand the mechanics of how search functions and the reason it does what it does, you can start applying that to the work you have in front of you, and you can see the differences of where you thought you were going and where they think consumers are going. And so I end up out at these conferences, I end up talking, and not through a planned action, I ended up being the voice of MSN Search for like 6 minutes. And then it rebranded to Bing. And then I was the unofficial voice of Bing. And of course, everything internally is like there are PR teams, there are marketing teams, there are program management teams, engineering layers, and all of this. And we're trying to figure out, like, do I or do I not represent the brand when I'm out? And this is me asking this question because people are assuming and they're asking me, and like, it's always like, well, this isn't official and blah, blah, blah. And it was like, I had this like instantaneous, like Now I understand everything Matt says. Now I get why everything starts like it's the exact same pattern every time. And it's because every single statement you make, you have to set the expectation clearly. Because the one time you don't is the one time you will be quoted out of context and it's a problem. And the last thing you want is anyone in PR going, huh? And having to pay attention to something like you should just be smoother than that. And Matt and I talked about this several times, and it goes with the territory. It goes with the territory when you are, the face of any organization. But I think there was maybe a bit more weight because these were the two largest engines. And there was, at times a bit of a frenemy thing. I mean, anybody wants to look it up, right? Like, Danny Sullivan got Matt and I to agree to do a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure spoof at a conference once. And we wore the clothes and we were in character and all the questions were framed that way. And so we had good times and kind of had some fun with it, great time. Matt and I walked on stage at South by Southwest one year, and the fire marshal came in and stopped the session and physically escorted people out of the room because we're way over capacity. And then we had to wait because they had to set up televisions outside so that everybody would be able to watch the session. Wow. Like it was off the hook, full green screen, parting the crowd, escorting us through, and I looked at my boss, who was one of the heads of PR, and I said, any last minute advice? He goes, yeah. Okay. Before I get into the advice, right? How family friendly are we on our recording?
We have the explicit button checked. So go ahead.
Okay. So he looks at me as I walk by and he says to me, he goes, I say, you got any last words? He goes, yeah, don't suck. And I'm like, okay, thanks, man. No, seriously, anything? And he just levels square, eye to eye. He goes, don't fuck up. And then he just sits down on the floor to just watch the show, right? And I'm like,
yeah,
awesome.
That's great advice.
Matt laughs at it. He's like, I get the same thing, right? He goes it's all on you, right? And I'm just like, whatever. So we had a great session. It was awesome. Had a little bit of fun. Took some fun at some people asking questions and the audience loved it. But it became an official thing because it was an unofficial thing. And we went back and forth. And I was basically like, is anybody else going to do this? Because I'm out there and I can answer these questions. And when I sit down with one of your engineers and I say, hey, you know what we need? We need a tool that shows us how many links we have pointed at our domain. Well, ideally, how many per URL? It was a big deal at the time. Everybody wanted to know. And the engineer looks at me and says, do you think links matter to ranking? And I just stopped the meeting and I'm like, okay, Sasi, hold on a second. I can't tell if you are pulling my leg. If you're trying to dissemble here, where you are literally trying to throw me off the track, or if you legitimately do not understand the role that links play in determining authority for a URL within a search engine. And he's like, I'm not an SEO. He goes, I don't know. And I'm just like, I think I'm home. Okay, I know what to do now. And off we went. And it was great, right? Because that was the team at the time that was maintaining the original Bing Webmaster Tools. And so from that, conversations started. They decided they needed a new version of Webmaster Tools. I went in, interviewed for the job, crushed that, got the job, crushed the tools, minorly crushed Google one day, but that's okay. It was a blip, right? It was just like a momentary thing, everybody wanted a link disavow tool and they cornered Matt on stage and asked him for it. And it was the day I announced the new Webmaster Tools for Bing. So we were riding high already. We had massive coverage through the media. And, I went and met my head engineer at a bar downtown in Seattle because we had just done the announcement. We were all done. And I went down to meet him. And I said, hey, I just came from Matt's session and everybody's after him for a link disavow tool. It's almost like they're storming the stage, right? Because he talked about it before. He had said that they're talking about it internally, and everybody was like, these guys just came up with a whole new tool set that's bigger, badder, clearer, more information, blah, blah, blah. And you can't even do this one thing. It was rude is what it was. And I said this, the engineer looks at me and he goes, yeah, we could probably build that this week. And he just totally low key, just no drama, drops this. And I'm like, I'm sorry, what? And then he speed dials his lead engineer, gets Alex on the phone. They talk about it. And Alex is like, yeah, he goes, yeah, I think we can, come up with an MVP over the next week or so. I'm like, great. We split up. He goes home. I go out to the after party. We're, talking with everybody at the event, and I come in the next day, and I'm sitting in my office, and it's like maybe 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and I get a message from Alex, and he's like, "Hey, can you come down to engineering?" So I go down a few floors into the bullpen where these guys are, and Alex is like, "I just want to show you something." I'm like, "Okay." And he logs into Webmaster Tools. Of course, the version of Tools that we have access to with our login was like, it was always a beta version. So it was always whatever the public had plus anything we were playing with. So we just logged in, and he goes into the navigation. Then all of a sudden there's link disavow in there, and he clicks on it. There's a whole tool. It's done. He stayed overnight, coded through the night, and just built it. And his idea of an MVP was literally like 2 inches away from production.
Jeez, wow.
It took me a week to try to figure out, like, do I actually need to change anything before we push this? And going crazy with the PR team, because it's like, hey, we literally could drop a hammer here. Like, do we want to do this? Is there, do we have any conversations going on in the background that could be preempted if we like suddenly lower the boom on this? Like, because the core search teams, they're often talking with each other because they're solving large scale problems that are not proprietary. They are literally societal problems. And so everyone needs to solve them in order for everything to step forward. And so they have those conversations. And everybody just kept coming back thumbs up. And so like a week later, we announced the disavow tool, and it was like, boom. And I'm just like, okay. And then I think maybe 4 months later, Google announced their disavow tool, and everyone was like, yeah, that's what.
Yeah. And then they're done that with Bing already.
Yeah. So there's always that back and forth. And of course, by that time, I was officially Mr. Bing. That was the thing, right? And it was, not without its challenges, I will say. I had an actual job as a PM that I had to do. I had a lot of writing. I was committed to, I think it was like 52 or 55 blog posts a year. And if I didn't meet that goal or exceed it, it affected my compensation at the end of the year. So like, wasn't something you were going to skip, like you had to do it. Meetings I had to be in, products I had to, give feedback on, like all of that stuff. My job wasn't technically to be on the road on stage with audiences, even though that was, I was traveling 35, 37 weeks out of the year.
I can imagine. You were everywhere.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Duane, can we stay at the Microsoft Wayback Machine for one more question? Because we know you were involved.
We'll see if my brain is still functional for the timeline.
I think a lot of our audience may have forgot about Cortana. It was around for over a decade.
Yeah.
Maybe 20 years. It was around for 15 years.
So Cortana as a name has been around for eons, literally the better part of 20 years. Okay. Microsoft, and I think a lot of companies do this, they create what is essentially a fake business so that you have something to reference in material, because you can't just say like, you want to use Word in your situation. You want to buy this product. Here's the way a company uses it. Let us give you a walkthrough. It's really hard to go through the process of getting permissions and getting companies to sign off on that, when you could just invent a company and name it Cortana. And now you have a fake company that you can use in every example. And you have the fake employees, and you have all of the illustrative situations, like all of that is yours. And Cortana also became trying to remember, Cortana was in Halo. I think Cortana was Master Chief's AI assistant, if I'm remembering correctly. I'm not a gamer. I only know these things because I worked on Cortana at one point. I met Master Chief and helped the Halo franchise with SEO. So like I come through knowing all this, not because I'm a gamer, right? But because like I actually met the human beings. And Master Chief, the username, that person was actually the head of development for Halo. So he was an actual employee at Microsoft. And in order to get into like Xbox, for example, I did a lot of work with those teams. In order to get in there, you actually had to have a gamer handle and you had to have credibility. So you actually had to have gamer cred in order to be hired on top of all the skills you were needed. So they took that very seriously because they believed that, and I think rightly so, like, how can you build for this world of people if you do not come from that world yourself? Like, intrinsically, you won't understand it. And so it's a model that has served them well. But, Cortana, as I was involved with it very early on, was the voice assistant. And so very early machine learning. And let me tell you, the unsexiest work you can imagine, right? I sat in a windowless office with a television, like literally a big screen monitor on the wall, and it would flash words at me and I would speak into a microphone. And that was like 8 hours a day for 4 days.
My God.
Let me tell you, you never appreciated a 15-minute break so much in your life as when you're doing that kind of work. Okay. And if you think that's a one-off, I actually did similar work while we were training models when I was at Yext. Different version of it. It was much more click, point, and select and align, answer with question, that kind of stuff. But it's the same level of unsexy training that those systems require. So shouldn't shock anyone that these systems all want to be kind of self-moderating in their training. They want to have the machine train the machine, basically, because like I was brought in because I am from Canada and I was the Canadian English voice that trained Cortana on voice inflection for Canadian English. And I'd still mispronounce things. I still have my own personal inflections and what have you. So, it becomes something that is very, sounds cool, but it's like really, it's a low bar.
So you were instrumental in launching Bing Webmaster Tools. You were also instrumental in launching schema.org. I'm less maybe curious about the launch of it and more curious about in our industry, right? There's a lot of debate. Is schema used in LLMs? Is it not? Maybe it is. We don't know. I'd love to get your opinion just based on your knowledge of schema. Use schema.
Yeah. And you'd be crazy to be thinking they're not using all of the structured data languages and all of the signals they can get. Because the number one thing that an LLM has to have is confidence that the answer is correct. Now, that doesn't seem to stop them sometimes, as we all know. Right? They just put stuff out there that's not factually accurate, but it's not because they're not trying. And I highly encourage folks to go wrap your head around the concept of a universal verifier. I talked about it in my Substack last week. It is a layer that is coming. There are versions of it now in certain places, but it's basically a machine fact-checking a machine. I'll wait for the laughter to stop. But when you do, what you're going to realize is that these systems are actually running verifying checks in the background. So before the LLM that is answering your question hands you that answer, it has to go through this validation layer, basically. And part of that validation layer's job is to collect information and collect understanding of what it believes is accurate and factual. So structured data is just one more signal that would be used to fill that library that the verifier pulls from. So, I'm sure if we just asked, ChatGPT, it would tell us, yeah, I use structured data, right?
I enjoyed that article you put out. I think I read it on Search Engine Journal, and the way you described it made so much sense. It was so clear, like you could almost highlight words. The verification layer could like highlight a word maybe yellow if it's not 100% accurate, or like just change the color of the highlighting if there's questionable authority behind the truth there. Who puts this together? Who brings that to market, though? It's not.
So look, I've been down this rabbit hole, right, Joe? And the reality here is, these systems are whether they're using the schema library per se, or they're pulling information from the markup, they're still getting direction, right? That's the reality. And I think that in order, like something like a universal verifier, that could come from a third party, like we could build one. But what you're doing essentially is building a model of something. And so, you would input your information. It would act like a universal verifier might act. If we understand how the system would react, then we would look at that output and say, okay, here's where we need to add more information, expand on information, and so on. But we'll never be able to see inside ChatGPT, Claude, right? This is like the proprietary stuff, right? And we're used to that as SEOs because Google has been doing that all its life. And I had to split that hair when I was with Bing. So, the reality is you will not see inside that layer unless the company says, hey, we're going to build tools and we're going to expose this information for you in order for you to help us build better. And I can't say if that's in their best interest, right? Like, I'd love to see that happen, but this is all math. That every single thing is converted to math. And so every bit of this is about, is it risky? Is it not risky? Inside the system, asking itself that. The answer, is this a risk? How little risk is this? How much risk is this? How close to accurate is it? Is it factual? And a lot of that happens on the fly, but a lot of it also happens from like knowledge it's built. So if I give you an answer and I tell you this answer and you agree with me, and then all of your watchers agree with me, and then everyone else in the industry agrees with me, I am more likely to continue to repeat that answer over and over again because the consensus is that that's a good answer. The systems work in a similar fashion. And so, take the hint from here, test the answer. The answer is good. It's valid. Okay. Use it again and again and again and 14 million more times. And when the answer starts to break down or the query changes, then you need to change that vector.
Hitting on the schema, just one other question there. I've seen the common claim that during the training data, right, like all the schema is stripped out and therefore it's not used. But it sounds like, and it would make sense, that during the training process, while it might be stripped out, they're training the model.
Yeah. They're aware, right? Like, one thing that I caution people against is trying to dumb down how complex all this is.
Right.
And the idea that it strips it out, that language would lead a listener to believe that it's gone. It's not useful. You throw it away. Because for us as humans using that lexicon, that is typically what we mean when we say we strip that out. We remove what we don't want. It's like trimming the fat off the steak. Like, you're not going to eat the fat, so you trim it off, right? But the reality is those systems are so complex that they are aware of that structured data. They are aware of where it applied. Now, is it stripped out? Oh, heck yeah, it's stripped out, because the LLM doesn't need bracket open, colon, quote, work for, quote, close bracket. That doesn't have a meaning inside the answer that it is trying to construct. It knows that's a piece of code, not words to use in an answer. And so, yeah, that's stripped out. But the intent behind it before it's stripped out is also captured by the system.
Yeah. Yep. That's the way I've always thought about it, but I didn't quite know how to put it so eloquently. So thank you for fielding that question.
When I started answering the question, I oversimplified this and I just went straight to, yeah, they use it. But there is a ton of nuance in there behind, yeah, they use it, right? And you go ask the systems, right? And they will tell you, we don't use structured data the way you use structured data. It's just a signpost. And I believe that because when you understand more about how these things parse data and what they're looking for, I just wrote this morning about the difference between semantic overlap and semantic density, and how you have to have semantic overlap to be included. And you actually have to have semantic density to pass the sniff test with a human. So your job is finding that infinitely moving balance point between them on a per chunk basis. And we're still having conversations where people are saying, I don't understand what do you mean chunk and chunking? And what does this refer to? And I'm like, you really should go ask a search engine to help define these things, right? Or go take a Coursera course or something, because there is a lot that's new in this that does apply to the work we do. And again, if we spend our day trying to dumb it down and oversimplify it, you will miss a lot of nuance. You will miss a ton of detail. And I remember, you guys will remember this, a month or two ago, it was like everywhere you looked was query fan out. Query fan out was it just exploded, right? Like, oh my God, this is a thing and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, I'm on the side of but we've kind of been doing this for a decade plus, right? If you've been serious about doing SEO, you've been serious about intent and about all of this branching that you do with your keyword analysis and ask, what are the tools called? There's a couple of tools that are out there that do this really well.
Phrase is a good one.
Exactly. And so I think that it's incredibly important for people to not take that step of, how can I create an analogy so that it's simpler for me to wrap my head around it? Take the step and go learn the detail about it, because what you're going to learn is the devil is in the details. And these systems work at such a detailed level that I have had conversations even last week, the week before, with people who are using, semantic density and semantic overlap interchangeably because they're fixated on the word semantic and they don't understand the application of the other word. They have not looked it up. They have not dug in. And let me tell you, it's hard on the brain, but this is where we're at right now.
Well, I want to ask you about the acronym debate too, because I feel like you have of all the people spouting all this stuff out, I feel like you have the internal awareness and just the experience to be able to think about this logically. So is it AEO? Is it still SEO? Is it GEO? It's like, how do you think about, like, when you're advising your clients, like, how do you talk about it?
I actually don't care what acronym is used. I'll use whatever is least frictional, but I do have a very clear opinion of this. I frankly don't care what we call it. What I care about is people are focused on the work and the depth of the work. I think that is a massive distraction, that people are getting wrapped up in this, that companies are getting wrapped up in this, the clients are getting wrapped up in this, and everybody thinks they're having serious conversations when they debate this or focus on why it should be called something, when the serious stuff is, where are you at balancing your density with your overlap? Where are you at with converting all your content to chunked content? This is the stuff that matters. And if you want to stay debating SEO versus GEO versus AIO versus whatever, okay, but really we're talking about the same stuff here. Oh, and incidentally, I did some research into GEO, and GEO is one of the most used acronyms. It is used in 183 different industries to represent 183 different meanings. So now imagine you show up and pitch a client who's in one of those fields and you're talking to them about GEO and they're sitting across the table wondering why you're using their acronym and they're impressed that you know so much about their industry. Imagine how difficult that conversation will be to unravel when they realize you're using a made up acronym that has nothing to do with their industry, and they placed false trust in your knowledge because they didn't understand your use of what they believe is their phrase. Right. So, I've written about new job titles that could possibly come about as a result of all of this work. Yeah, look, the fact of the matter is, all of this work can be done by an SEO, and it's going to be tasked by an SEO to do this work. Should we call it SEO? If you want to get into that debate, we have to start asking ourselves if ChatGPT actually earns the moniker of search engine, not by a traditional definition, but
consumers say I search with ChatGPT.
Exactly, because it's an action. The verb has its own meaning now.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So look, SEO by any other name doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is that you understand the work and you understand the new tools and you understand the data that the tools are giving you, and that you can make meaningful decisions on behalf of a business. That's what matters. And right now, that debate about GEO and AIO and SEO and what should we call it, that is delaying action in companies while people debate this. Or worse, they're sitting on the sidelines saying, oh, the industry can't make up their mind. So until they figure it out, we're going to sit here and wait. Okay, that's fine. Because I don't know if anyone's noticed this, but there's generally, and I am generalizing here because I understand the difference, there's generally one answer from these new systems. So you want to wait and your competitor is the one answer? You want to wait and your competitor is the one that builds the trust and is continually brought forward as the answer that gets tested over and over and trusted over and over and cements themselves as the answer to the question? Okay, keep debating about GEO because someone is going to step ahead of you. And that's going to have a material impact.
It is superficial.
Yeah. I definitely want to encourage everyone to go read your Substack because it's phenomenal.
Thank
and
you.
You mentioned your study or your point of view on what the job market will look like. And you had a great post. I can't remember if it was an excerpt of that on Search Engine Journal or not, but it was around the skills that are being trained today are the incorrect one.
Yeah.
You reference things like chunking and vectors, right? Like all these things that are heavy into the machine learning side of things, which all sound really technical.
Yeah, but they're not. That's the crazy thing. I mean, they are technical, but they're
technical, but the concepts are simple once you understand them. Yeah.
Right.
But you also, and I think this is true as well, when you look at the job displacements that are at higher risk, there's also it sort of leans into the content side. So as an outsider, right, if you're reading like chunking vectors and then you're seeing maybe content as the area that in the near term could be impacted most, do you foresee a situation where the industry moves like more on the technical side and we sort of lose the expertise on the content side? Or is that?
Yeah. So look, I think about this a lot, right? Because I write about this. I'm very fortunate that my wife is a seasoned award-winning HR practitioner. So I get a very different view into hiring for tech jobs, hiring in publishing industry, hiring in general. I'm very fortunate to have that to kind of bounce these things off of, right? So like when I'm writing about this stuff, I'm not just like picking concepts out of the air and tossing them around. I have my own built-in expert to kind of bounce these ideas off of. And here's the reality. The reality is, I think it's an oversimplification if we all sit down and say, oh, content's going to be affected. They're going to lose their jobs. AI is going to take over. I don't know about you guys, but go ahead and try to write something long form using even ChatGPT 5 or Claude, right? Like
Awful.
it's not the experience that you hope it will be. And yet, if you sit down with somebody who's a content writer and you give them, here are the 5 bullets that I need to get across. Here's the main core. Here's the arc, going to start with fear, going to end on empowerment. Like if you do those things, which a good content development program will have maps for all of this. And your writers, they will be muscle memory. They will just like ask you a question or, you'll fill in a form and they'll fill it in and go, okay, this is what the SEO needs. And off you go and you write this stuff. And that's still a much closer to the bullseye result, even if it is like 5 times slower. But then you save on editing and you save on fact checking and you save on all that side of things. But the fact of the matter is, every one of those people are the ideal person to be the person guiding their company on chunk analysis of their content. I can't think of a better person. Because if I give you 2% more knowledge, the concept of chunking, what it is, what it looks like, a bunch of examples, then I introduce the whole idea of semantic overlap and semantic density. And I tell you how chunking is impacted by these things and how it impacts these things. And then the final, this is what it means to the answer. If I give you that 2%, you are the ideal person to sit down and say, here's all the content we have. Here's how we should arrange it. Here's what we should do with it. And so many times it's as simple as a line break or a bullet. It is not a mystery. Oh, it's a mystery to a lot of people because they're not paying attention to it and they're getting caught up in, oh, chunking. That's kind of a weird word to apply in a technical setting. Vector. Oh my God, that's technical. What do I do with that? Right? Vector means direction. That's it. Just means direction. Do not fear these things. Get in there and look at them. Because if you're on the content side, Microsoft did a great survey about this, right? And the data shows people that are in roles where it's a repetitive or a creative section are the most likely to be impacted by AI. Writers are in that category. Journalists, writers, authors, whatever the name is, whatever work you're doing, if you're writing, you're in that category. But it is a very small step for you to be in the category of highly valued because you're the first alignment layer with these LLMs. It's the content person and not a huge skill to learn.
Your recent post, the overlap versus density hit my inbox like, I don't know, 20 minutes before this conversation.
Exactly.
I skimmed it quickly, but of what I read and what you've talked about, it seems like the content role is almost the only role that can marry those two differences well, where you're sort of talking to the LLM and talking to the user and sort of meeting those two in the middle. Is that a fair assessment or?
I don't know. I mean, like, honestly, I think what we're getting into now is how is your company structured? How are your jobs aligned, right? Because I could just as easily come back at you, John, and say, that's the role of a technical SEO, because in some companies, the technical SEO is actually responsible for content generation, or the technical SEO lead is also responsible for the content development team. So to me, it's not as obvious as it's got to be the content person. If I were walking through the halls of a company and you said, we need to find somebody to run chunk analysis. Okay, take me to your writers. Like that would be my first thought, right? Because we're talking about content. Nobody knows it better. Nobody knows the process better than them. I'm going to give them that one little bit extra to do on top. And once they get the hang of it, they're aligned. Depending on how your company is laid out, It could be an analyst. It could be a manager. I don't know. One of you two might start doing this just for fun as a side hustle.
I've read a lot of your writing recently, and I've seen you in a lot of interviews, and I'm going to try to pull two quotes from different points in time, like 4 months apart, but I put these together and it's very hopeful. So I just want to see if I can either comment on it and maybe bring these two quotes together. Recently, you said search optimization will be around for at least another 30 years. And there's been a lot of fear in our industry that jobs are going away. But like that left me really hopeful. And then maybe 4 months ago, you had a conversation about the search professionals who are going to excel in the new reality we face ourselves, optimizing for AI search. And you said people management skills are going to be the differentiator between a good and a average search pro. And I wonder, I know there are different interviews and different times, but can you put those together for us?
Yeah. So, okay, here's my thread, right? Like I get this, people ask me like, how did you get to where you're at in your career? And I graduated with a hospitality administration degree, and they're like, and you're doing this now? And to me, it's a straight line, right? So like follow my logic. Okay. So I believe that and maybe I'm taking liberties people won't agree with. I don't know. We'll find out, right? If people want to comment on this, that would be great. But I believe that the core fundamental work that an SEO does is to improve a product. And in theory, that product is worth being showcased to others. I'm sure we all believe ours is the best. We should all be number one and so on, or heck, we wouldn't have an industry if that wasn't the case. But the work to do that never runs out. There's always another technological hurdle. There's always some difference. There's always a change. Just look at the stuff on my Substack. Look at the conversations we're having. And it's not just me. It's my king. It's everybody else in the industry as well, right? Like people are leaning into this. Okay. Eric Engie just released a new book talking about SEO and AI. Like Brett Tabke is all over this. And yes, I know I'm saying names that are like coated in dust, right? Because we've all been around for a while. But we saw the initial change, we've seen the intervening changes, and we're here for this big change. So ultimately, I believe that the act of needing improvement will always be there for content. Okay. Like the way I write something, the way I write it now is vastly different than the way I wrote it 25 years ago. 25 years ago, I was sure of myself that anything I was putting down was the sum total of all knowledge that needed to be known on this topic. And I was confident in that. Now, every single thing I write, I approach it from what don't I know? Because there's got to be something out there I don't know on this topic, which means I am more pedantic. I'm slower at creating things. The machines don't do that. The machines are literally me 25 years ago. Here's the corpus of knowledge I possess. Here's the answer. Here you go. You should be happy I did that in 1.3 seconds. Aren't we all happy here today? This is awesome. By the way, you're a genius. Like that's what you get back from these systems. And much as I want to believe, that I'm a genius, only my mom gets to say that with any level of certainty, and I will trust it. Otherwise, I'm like a little skeptical. And I'm thinking, well, if you're that, use the word obsequious, I guess, maybe I need to be a little more careful. And that is the domain of the SEO, of digging into the details, of uncovering all of those little pieces that need to be optimized to bring something that is good to better, better to best, and so on. And I don't think that goes away. I have not seen, you guys were there for the launch of ChatGPT 5. I don't know about you guys, but I think the graph went like that. Mm-hmm. And then it leveled off and it was in Crapsville. And now it's back up again. Like it's doing really well over the last few days. But that falling down, we all watched the same announcement, right? It's better at writing. It's better at math. It does these things better. It's like having a PhD in your pocket. And I'm like, I don't want that PhD in my pocket because they're clearly an idiot. So maybe they are a PhD in one thing, but they do not understand anything else. And the reality is that these systems always need human guidance, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, maybe some of the idea around AGI, some of the big leaders are thinking anywhere 2 years to 5, 8 years. Some of the big names in AGI are saying 10 to 30 years. I don't know. I'm not really looking for AGI. If you gave me an AGI, probably the first thing I would tell it to do is make me a bunch of money so I don't have to work. And then it's all moot at that point, but I'm pretty sure we would all do the same thing. And therefore, the world would be a very different place with that technology. We don't have it, and I don't think we're going to have it for a while. And it's not coming based on what we're building and using now. And so ultimately, we need the human in the loop. It's a common phrase now. I think most people have heard it. It is very real. That doesn't go away, which kind of brings me to the people management skills. Okay. ChatGPT 5. Let's just say it's a genius. Let's just say it's a PhD. It also happens to be a 7-year-old who is predisposed to pleasing you every time and has zero life experience, but has access to the entire corpus of humanity's history and knowledge. And that's a great opportunity in some ways, but in other ways, it's a disaster. Because it will just tell you something and be totally right in your face, like, this is all there is to it. And you're like, no, I know that's not the right answer. And it won't know the difference. And then when you correct it, it kind of gaslights. Oh, yeah, I don't know where that came from, but here we go. You're on the right track. And so you do need the people management skills to be able to understand the type of asset you are managing in an AI-based system. I like to think of them as a helpful intern. Plugged in, has access to a lot of things, can research stuff faster than me, can find things faster than me. It's really, really good for those things. But again, as a people manager, I have to know how to deploy my people. Okay, Joe, you're awesome at A. So Joe, you're going to go do A for me. John, you've got B covered. That's awesome. ChatGPT, you've got research. C, go get that. But you know what? Joe's in charge of how we write things. He is the voice of this operation. So everything you do in C has to be given to A. And then Joe looks at that and says, okay, well, I'm a crappy typer. So John, you're really good at typing fast. Can you finalize this article? And then we can go ahead and publish it. So you have to have that kind of people management skill set. And that doesn't mean you have to have managed people. People who are really good at this, like parents, for example, will naturally fall into this and have an aptitude for it because they will have seen that 7-year-old trying to please them in real life and being like, appreciate what you're trying to do here. It's a little off the mark. And that's okay. It's still useful. It's still usable. You can give them the guidance. And so to me, these things are very interconnected, right? As a person managing an output for a business goal, you definitely need to see how these things connect. No doubt in my mind. Then again, maybe I have a smooth brain and things aren't quite straight in there. I don't know.
You had a great interview with Gianluca on, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, on the search session. And you talked about, you mentioned Brett Tabke, and you referenced him in that interview as well, creating, I think it was 26 steps to like 15K or something.
Yeah,
so if you
exactly.
I actually went back and found that link. It was back in 2002, if you can believe it.
Yeah. A few minutes ago.
If you were thinking about creating a list like that today, and then, I don't know, let's call it 3 or 5 things. Like, what would those things be in your mind?
It's funny. When we were prepping for this, I saw that question and I thought, oh, this is going to be the one that is difficult because it's a moment in time thing, right? And it's really, really important for people to understand and acknowledge what we're doing today, the optimization that we are all saying we are doing. And there are people that are out there saying, look, we're talking about stuff that doesn't have meaning. We're saying things that don't really have any depth to them. Nobody's been able to prove anything. So how can you advise on this? The fact of the matter is, what we're talking about is machine learning basics. We're talking about information that is readily available that we can go out and look at and say, that's how it treats this piece of information. Now, my job as the SEO is to translate that into the world of what we do against the world of the output of that system. And so as we're like kind of looking through all of this, I look back on that and I think, okay, we only got to where we're at and we're only tackling the problems we're tackling because all of that existed beforehand. And in fact, this generative, AI, SEO or GEO or AIO or whatever you want to call it. And don't want to offend anyone. Everybody's welcome. This work that we're doing is only needed and possible because all the other work has existed beforehand. Now, this is where things get a little complex, all right? Because if you have not cracked the nut on structured data, you're going to have a problem moving forward. If you cannot get a good content management program, I mean your people determining what to write, how to write it, having it properly structured and laid out, it's readable, it's legible, it's comprehensible. If you haven't ascended to that level yet, you are going to struggle as you need to move forward. And so, we are legitimately on this kind of edge. I'm hoping that people will understand that the work that we need to do moving forward is complex, it's technical, but you don't get to walk away from the other stuff. Now, back to my moment in time, the 26 steps to 15K a day, that was a moment in time. The 26 discrete things, the work items that you could do that would improve your organic ranking in this new thing called Google. Okay, let's understand that existed then. And if you were to write that today, it would look very different. But the step from today's version of that to this new optimization that we do in these systems, we're really just layering on some stuff. You still have to write the good content. You have to focus on the topics. You have to have, fast load speeds on your pages. You have to have, good structured data deployment. You have to have all of that stuff, all of the best in class that we had from, what I think of as traditional SEO at this point. Then you've got to get into chunk analysis and then everything that goes along with the concept of chunking, including query fan out and this semantic overlap, semantic density, and that balance point. So those are things that are on my list now. I definitely want to understand about vector similarity, which I'm going to use some of my query fan out to help me understand what potential vectors are. Hand in the air, I know we will never see what the vectors look like from inside the system. ChatGPT will never tell us, this is my vector that I follow to get to the answer for this. We won't see those things. So the closest we can come is an approximation. But if you do query fan out and you see all the things that are related to a topic, you're starting to get a pretty good understanding of some of the vectors that exist to get to an answer. And so now you've got to go down the, semantic overlap and then the actual density portion of that conversation, because once you get in the door, you have to prove that to humans, you are worth consuming. Overlap gets you in the door. Density proves that you're actually worth consuming, or proves that you're fluffy and you shouldn't be consumed because it's too much, It depends honestly on the moods and whims of the human reading the answer at that point. So that's my list. My list is not particularly deep, right? We could, ricochet off into all kinds of other areas where we're going to talk about all these arcane and technical things, but these are literally arcane and technical things. Right. I think that the most important thing somebody can do is, first off, be aware of all of that. But second, focus on the things that you can work on right now. And if there are not tools available to go and look up this information, or the systems themselves will not share the information with you, you shouldn't be spending your time trying to figure out what a tool would look like and trying to convince your DevOps team to build you that tool and try to find money to build you a sandbox environment so you can go do your own vector analysis to see what it looks like. No. Just focus on the work that you can actually influence. Wait for independent companies to build these tools and get them out there. Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
The quadrant that you published on your Substack was an incredible resource for John and I to try to understand, do we have the right tool set to deploy this new service for our client? And we didn't. So it was really helpful for us to find out where those gaps. No, it was great. I think it was like a Lumascape, it was like a Lumascape of the point in time we're in. Is that something you're going to build on?
In fact, it's either going to become a quarterly or probably once every 6 months. It's going to be updated. And, I know that some of the smaller guys, they're going to struggle, right? Because money is the core of everything. Okay. I was a part of 2 startups recently, and both of them just stopped for me because money is what enables you to pay people to stay focused so that they can actually go write the code for the new feature. And then you can actually have money to market that thing, to get people on board, because let's face it, all these new tools, you are literally inventing a category and trying to teach people who have already spent their money this year on tools why the next time they spend money, it needs to be with you. And that's really hard because historically we've had tools that were, I wouldn't quite call them all in one, but we know the big names, the big tool set providers. And if you were a member of those tools and using them, it covered a lot of ground. So these tools, it's a very, we're seeing a lot of change in a lot of areas. Okay. Like these tools are very focused on the areas that historically SEOs leaned into. And they needed them. They did the work. They built the features that people would pay for, that they could take data out of, make decisions around, and improve ranking or whatever it is they were trying to improve. And those tools don't work in the new environment. You can't just point that tool over here and say, go collect. It doesn't, it's not, it's a fundamentally different thing. And while those companies are investing and growing and trying to work on things, you see a lot of vibe coded new tools, people showing up saying, oh, hang on a second, I can do chunk analysis for you. So I'm going to build a tool. This is what it's going to do. I'm not going to lie. I have 2 companies outlined on my own for tool sets that I can build. And I have half of the code for an MVP on one of them completed. I'm not a programmer, but I have enough that if I had a programmer, I could give it to them and they would know what I'm trying to accomplish. And then we run into money again, because what I don't have is $180,000 to hand to a programmer to say, this is the project you work on. You need to go build it. We're at that. More than once, it's occurred to me that we're right back at the beginning of SEO, where it's a bit of a Wild West. And it's a little disconcerting because if you've only been in this industry for 5, maybe even 10 years, you have no concept of what it was like when we had no tools and we had no data and we had no information and we were guessing and we were sharing information on discussion forums about, 14 keywords here did this. And then, oh, no, he got, hit with the band hammer. Don't do that. It's a very different world. It's a much more mature world that we're in now than it was then. But in some ways, we're being forced back into this kind of Wild West situation where, like I saw yet again today, somebody posted up on social the quote from Google saying, we're sending higher quality traffic, we're sending more traffic, and the clicks are still there. And, the person is showing the literal, like, clicks going down, impressions going up, like 100% opposite to what they're being told. And that's actually from Google Search Console. That visualization came from their reporting in Google Search Console. And the person who runs Google Search Console is saying 180 degrees opposite that out loud. And it's making some confusion for people. And look, I've been inside at the big engine. I get it. Like it's really hard to give one answer that applies everywhere. And that is at the scale that Google's operating. I am certain their statement makes complete sense. And I am also certain that with the people I know in my network, tens of thousands of people, I could find thousands of people who would refute that statement with their data. But on a global scale of trillions of URLs in play, I'm pretty sure that what they're seeing is different than maybe what we're seeing on an individual level. So, that's
interesting. Actually, I hadn't thought about it from that perspective. I think, when things are negative, people also amplify that more.
Absolutely.
So maybe they're, I don't know, it would be hard to believe, but I guess it's possible they're seeing the opposite, right? I mean, I don't know.
Do you think, so let me phrase it this way. Do you think that it's reasonable to believe that a senior leader at Google who has to get a statement approved by PR and legal, and in order to get that statement made in the first place, had to work with an entire data analytics team, dozens of people, over probably a couple of months of information gathering? What are the odds that person made a factually inaccurate statement of that magnitude? No, their data tells them that's the statement.
But it's a riddle to the world because it's been.
I can fully understand that. Absolutely. And us in our industry, we have to acknowledge that we are and keep ourselves in somewhat of a bubble. If you actually go out and talk to the tens of thousands of business owners out there just doing this on their own, trying to learn enough to move themselves forward and help their own business out, those people don't have a horse in this race. They don't care one way or the other. And for them, it's all about revenue. What to me was the really telling part in that statement was the quality of the click. Because I've been talking about quality of clicks since my time at Bing. And it's only been recently that Google has started talking about quality of clicks. So There's old data out there that would tell you that the quality of the click coming from Bing was higher than it was from Google. And that's historically, at least been my belief, because I had access to that data and we talked about it out loud. It's not a big deal because the volume just trumps all of that, right? But hey, if Google's in a situation now where they can legitimately start talking about the quality of the click, and that has a meaningful impact on people, meaning, look, you didn't get 10 $1 sales, you got one $20 sale, and you lost 15 out of 20 on your traffic count. You don't care. You don't care. The money is going up. The rest of the metrics, 90 days later, that graph is just going to go. And you've got a fresh new line. You're only looking at one line. There's no drop anymore. It's history. But your revenue keeps ticking up, and that's what matters. So it's a tough one, really. That one was a tough one.
When I worked on the search team, on the page search side at Microsoft, that was always the hook that we hung our hat on, which is like traffic much lower, but quality significantly higher. Typically, conversion rates are higher, et cetera.
And there was
really
a lot of data behind it, right? Like the demographic data behind it, right? Higher educated buyer, more affluent, larger purchase sizes, like all of that just flowed. And I have no idea if that's still the case today. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But what's fascinating to me is while I debate this in the back dusty cobwebs of my mind, I wonder if somebody like ChatGPT or Perplexity is going to come along and just be like, we're just going to take everybody. So all of whatever you're thinking about is irrelevant now because they're all with us. And that's it.
Right.
Like,
Well, listen, I know we've kept you for a long time. So this has been amazing. We had a whole section on, AI's impact on agencies in the future, more selfishly than maybe for our audience. So hopefully we can have you back and dig into that a little bit.
Happy to. We can speed round it. We can go deep, whatever you guys want to do.
Yeah, let's jump into a couple rapid fires.
Okay.
If you have the time.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So you and Joe have a little bit of a camaraderie here, but what are 3 guitar chords you find yourself riffing more than any others?
Okay. So this is a bit of a shock. I don't play. I only
Really?
roll. Yes. I suck.
That's amazing.
At one point I knew 6 chords and had terrible like strumming technique, was just abysmal, right? Never really got that down. And so was never really able to pull anything together. And then over a couple of years, I simply just didn't pick up a guitar to play or do anything. I'll be honest, I got fascinated with cigar box guitars and it kind of sidetracked me for a little bit. And these are 3-string guitars and the chords are different. And so it kind of got away, but it's this really jangly thing. And then I got into my usual, which is like, well, if Rolls-Royce built one of these, what would it look like? And, off I went and that's it. But I'm very much more into the math of building and the art of finishing. That's where my head is at. So yeah, sorry.
Well, how about this? This one I know you do. What is your favorite meat to smoke if you're pressed for time?
Ooh, if I'm pressed for time, I'll tell you what's been my nemesis is a tri-tip, because I have failed more times than I have succeeded to smoke a tri-tip and it still comes out nice and moist. For maybe 5 minutes after you take it out and you slice it up, it's fine. And then you realize that in fact, it was actually way overdone and it's all the juices have left the building and now it's just dry. It works really well for things like chilies and, like sloppy joes and things like that after that, because you're going to add a bunch of moisture back in and it'll mask it. But that's my go-to. I have been struggling to find turkey breast here in Southern California. I'm told by all the butchers it's a seasonal thing. They only get it, in the fall, but I desperately want to smoke turkey breast. And I've been dabbling with some chicken breasts. It's a bunch of work. It's not a bunch of work to fire up a smoker and get it up and running. It's like literally a couple of minutes and you're off and running, but the cleanup can be, an hour or more. And is that worth it for like 2 chicken breasts? I don't know, but I will say this, my favorite to put on the smoker, and I will be doing this after we wrap up, is a pork butt. I've got a Boston butt sitting in the fridge. I'm going to cut it into large steaks and smoke it this afternoon and have pork steaks for dinner for probably the next week.
No, I'm really hungry. If you could sit down today with Matt Cutts, is there a question you would ask him or a topic you'd want to discuss with him?
Yes. And it's got nothing to do with the world of search. At one point, Matt was involved with the US, I don't even know the name of it. It was mapping. It was a US government office that was in charge of mapping. And I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff. So I would want to know more about how they do what they do, why they're doing it, the areas they're focused on, how they make decisions on what information to update when, that kind of thing. But yeah, I have not talked to Matt since he left Google. It's been a minute.
Been a while, yeah. All right, last one. If there's a book or maybe a podcast that you'd recommend for our listeners, maybe to either, I don't know, I'll leave it open-ended. You have a book or a podcast you'd recommend for our listeners that you're really enjoying today?
Okay. I'm going to give you a fiction, and the fiction is a series. I'm on like book 25 now, I think. I don't know. It's called The Backyard Starship. It's really well written. It is an Earth-based fiction. It has to do with history and future. The characters are all very well developed. If anybody has come across Murderbot and that series, I was an early reader of Murderbot. Not entirely sure how I feel about the show yet. I'm watching it, but I'm having a hard time getting over, because in the book, I thought the character leaned female, and in the show, I can't help but think of the character as male, even though it's technically androgynous. That's where my head goes. So I'm just having this weird disconnect of like, you took the character from this to this. And yeah, I'm hoping after a few more episodes, that'll just go away and I won't care anymore. But yeah, it's, that's kind of where I'm at. I read for entertainment. I don't watch a lot of television. And so I do read a lot of fiction and a lot of business books. So yeah.
All right, last one. We've started sort of a prediction question to sort of close things out. If you go to google.com in the next 12 or maybe 24 months, what do you expect that experience to be?
Okay. Yeah, this is a good one and fun. I expect kind of what everybody is expecting. I expect AIO to be more of a percentage. I also expect Google to launch paid ads inside AIO on an auction-based system, but it's not going to be what the old PPC system was. You can't bolt that in and say, oh, we're just going to fire an ad here. In fact, I hate to reference this again, but I Substacked this one. I outlined what that native auction-based system would look like inside an LLM answering system. Shockingly to me, I didn't see it coming. The day before I published, I did a little more research, just as you do. I've been working on it for a week before I hit publish, take one more lap around the internet, see if there's anything else that you should add. And I came across a reference to a program that Google was working on that sounds an awful lot like exactly what I was suggesting. And I was like, it took me about 2 hours of like reading it, and there was only 2 articles referencing it across anywhere that I could find. Wow. And I'm like, okay, so clearly they want this on the down low. It's academic stuff, and I was just fascinated with the fact that like, wow, these are like kind of parallel thoughts, Now, I don't know that they're using any of the ideas that I'm talking about or anything like that. However, I do know that they have a very vested interest in solving that problem. How do they migrate revenue out of traditional SERPs with paid ads on a click basis and into something like an AIO answer, where there's very much a fit for purpose answer to question match. Mm-hmm. And you can't really show ads that are anything but a perfect alignment. And then you start throwing in some stuff like, hey, you know what? They have AI managed bidding now. And it was talking about something else that's AI related to advertising. And my personal favorite tie-in, if we want to talk about predicting, and we'll see how close this comes, Google has Veo 3 now, which is really good at creating videos. And so you can imagine a system where you, the advertiser, say, here's my brand, here's my brand book, here's everything you're allowed to say about me, here are all the products and services I offer, here are all the things you have to stay away from. So you essentially draw the size of the envelope, and then you say, here's my MX, go. And Google in real time sees a cohort of people developing and saying, we're interested in this topic. On the fly, it uses Veo to create an AI developed video ad that it then embeds as part of the answer. And the ad is talking about your product or service in real time. And if the click happens, your credit card is hit and off you go. They have all of the pieces for this exist. Whether you could make that work in real time, dude, I don't know. Right. But like the PM in me says anything can be built. Just get me the right developer. Right? So And I'm thinking to myself, like, never bet against Google, right? They've got really smart people on payroll there. So I have a feeling if anyone's going to crack that nut, it's going to be them. They're motivated, they're talented. And I think that 12 months from now, we're going to be seeing something like that living in that space. And it's going to be good for advertisers. It's going to be different for SEOs for sure. But that's what we're all talking about here. So we're talking about the new way to optimize. So,
All right. I mean, this has been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time. Before we let you go, let everybody know where they can find you. Are you going to be speaking anywhere?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be, so probably somewhere nobody's going to be, LA Tech Week here in October in Los Angeles. So if folks are around, I'll be speaking there. But I'm also going to do my annual trip down to Dallas for State of Search. And I'm one of the closing keynotes again this year. I think this is like year 12 or 13 now doing that. Like, it's just like it's a thing, right? Like I should rent an apartment in Dallas, I think. And look, if anybody wants to track me down, my website is unboundanswers.com. Go there, hit me up, or just hit me on LinkedIn and, we'll get a call going or whatever.
Sounds good. We'll make sure to link to a lot of these references in the show notes as well.
Yeah. And
thanks again for joining us on the Page 2 podcast.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed the show, please remember to subscribe, rate, and review. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.